He loved his white prisoner more than his wife, and his final choice shocked the tribe. The sun was just beginning to rise over the distant hills, casting long golden shadows across the rugged land. In this remote corner of the world, life followed the rhythm of the earth. The villagers, small in number but strong in spirit, lived in harmony with the land. They hunted, farmed, and protected their homes with pride. Among them, one man stood out, not only for his strength but for the respect he commanded. His name was Camel, and he was known throughout the tribe as a great warrior. His muscles were hard from years of training and labor, his eyes sharp and always alert, and his heart loyal to his people and their traditions. Everyone trusted him to lead when danger approached because Camel had never failed his tribe. Camel's home was a simple one, made of stone and clay, surrounded by fields where his wife, Amina, grew vegetables and herbs. Their life together had always been quiet, full of routines and small joys. Amina was gentle, wise, and patient, and she loved Camel deeply. She often smiled at him as he returned from the hunt, tired and dusty, offering him warm food and kind words. Life was simple, yet it was a life Camel cherished. One morning, as Camel patrolled the outer edges of the territory, he noticed signs of recent disturbance. The grass was trampled, small footprints led into the forest, and broken branches marked a path. He followed the trail carefully, silent and attentive, until he found something he could not ignore. A woman with pale skin and light hair was sitting near a small stream, looking lost and exhausted. Her clothes were torn from travel, and she seemed frightened, unsure of where she had landed. She looked entirely out of place in this rugged, sun-baked land, far from the cities or villages she might have known. Camel approached cautiously, as he would with any stranger. He could see that she was alone and unarmed, but the tribe's rules were clear. Any outsider who entered their lands without permission could not roam freely. She must be brought to the elders for judgment. He spoke to her in the native language, asking who she was and where she came from. Her voice was soft, almost trembling, but she tried to explain. She had traveled far, lost her way, and stumbled into their territory. Camel could see that she was honest, but rules were rules. With a firm yet careful hand, he guided her back toward the village. She followed silently, her eyes wide with fear and curiosity. As they walked, Camel observed her. There was something about her calmness despite her obvious fear. She did not cry, scream, or beg. She simply walked, keeping pace with him, her gaze sometimes on the ground, sometimes looking around at the unfamiliar land. Camel found himself paying attention to her movements, her quiet manners, and the way she seemed to listen carefully to every sound. It was unusual, he thought. Most strangers would panic or resist. She did neither. For a moment, he wondered if she understood the danger she was in, or if she simply accepted her situation. By the time they reached the village, news had already spread. Children peeked from behind doors, women paused in their chores, and the elders gathered, curious and cautious. Camel brought her forward and explained who she was and how he had found her. The elders murmured among themselves, their expressions serious. According to tribal tradition, outsiders were not automatically considered enemies, but they could not simply remain free. The woman would be kept in the care of the tribe, observed, and judged according to their customs. Camel's role, as assigned by the elders, was to guard her and ensure she did not leave the village unprotected. At first, Camel felt only duty. He did not feel anything beyond responsibility. His wife, Amina, watched quietly from their home, sensing the tension. She knew the rules and she knew the danger of outsiders, but she trusted Camel to handle the situation. Camel brought the woman to a small room near his own quarters. It was modest but safe, with blankets and food. He explained that she was not in danger from him personally, but she could not leave. The woman, whose name was eventually revealed as Alara, nodded in understanding. She did not argue, did not cry. She simply accepted that her life had changed suddenly and without warning. Days turned into nights, and Camel continued his duty without complaint. He would bring her meals, check on her, and ensure she was comfortable within the limits set by the elders. At first, the interaction between them was formal and cautious. Camel did not speak much, and Alara responded politely but sparingly. They were two people from completely different worlds, brought together by circumstances neither had chosen. Yet, in the silence of shared spaces, small moments began to appear. Alara would hum quietly to herself while mending her clothes, and Camel noticed it. He would leave her blankets in a careful way, making sure she had warmth at night, and she seemed to appreciate the small gestures. Over time, the warrior began to see her differently. He noticed her resilience, her courage in the face of fear, and the way she respected the customs she did not understand. Unlike many outsiders he had encountered, she did not mock or resist the tribe. She listened, learned, and adapted. Camel found himself curious about her thoughts, her past, and her way of life. He did not speak to anyone about it, for he knew that such feelings were dangerous. Yet quietly, he began looking forward to their conversations, which were brief but meaningful. Even small exchanges of words carried weight, and he found himself thinking about them long after they ended. The tribe continued its routines, unaware of the subtle change taking place. The elders remained watchful, ensuring that the rules were respected. Camel's wife, Amina, also sensed a change. Though she did not fully understand it, she noticed her husband's gaze lingering on Alara longer than usual. She noticed the small acts of care he performed and the slight smiles exchanged between the two. Yet she trusted him and knew that he valued family and tradition. Still, a quiet worry began to grow in her heart, though she kept it to herself. Camel, meanwhile, was caught between duty and curiosity. Every day, he reminded himself that he was responsible for her safety, and nothing more. But in the long hours of the evening, when the village was quiet and the firelight flickered across the room, he found himself listening to her stories. Alara spoke of distant lands, of cities filled with noise, and of rivers that stretched beyond the horizon. She spoke of books she had read, songs she had heard, and dreams she had once held. Camel had never left his land, had never seen such places. Yet through her words, he could feel a world beyond his own. He began to admire her bravery, her openness, and her willingness to trust him, a stranger in a land that was foreign to her. Despite the growing connection, Camel remained careful. He knew the tribe would never accept a foreigner as one of their own. He knew his loyalty to his people, and his family must come first. Yet, the quiet moments they shared began to create a bond that was difficult to ignore. It was in the simple things, a shared smile, a brief conversation, a careful glance. Each small interaction chipped away at the distance between them, slowly building something neither expected. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the hills and the sky turned shades of pink and orange, Camel found himself sitting by the fire with Alara. She had managed to make a small tea from the herbs grown in the village. He sipped it quietly, watching the way her eyes caught the light. She spoke softly about her homeland, about the mountains and rivers, the streets and marketplaces. He listened, fascinated not just by the stories but by the way she spoke, calmly, thoughtfully, with a respect for the world around her. For the first time in his life, Camel felt something he could not name. It was not just duty, not just curiosity. It was a quiet admiration, a respect that went deeper than any he had felt before. By the time the night fell, the village was silent, and Camel returned to his duties, patrolling the perimeter and ensuring the safety of everyone. Yet his mind lingered on Alara, on the stories she told, and the calm courage she displayed. He could not ignore the shift in his heart, even as he reminded himself of his responsibilities. The line between duty and emotion began to blur, and Camel realized that life had brought him a challenge far different from any battle he had ever faced. In the days that followed, the pattern continued. Camel guarded, Alara adapted, and the quiet moments between them grew more frequent. The warrior could not explain the feelings stirring within him, but he knew that something important was changing. It was a connection built on trust, respect, and understanding. Something deeper than mere duty, something fragile but real. And as the tribe went about its daily life, none of them could see the transformation occurring quietly in the heart of their greatest warrior. Days passed quietly in the village, yet the atmosphere around Camel and Alara began to shift. The bond that had started with small glances and shared silences grew stronger. Camel had always been a man of discipline, a warrior shaped by rules and tradition. His life had been predictable: protect the tribe, honor his family, and follow the customs that had guided his people for generations. He never imagined that a stranger, an outsider, could stir emotions he did not fully understand. And yet, Alara's presence did just that. Alara, for her part, remained cautious but kind. She learned quickly how to move around the village without disturbing anyone, how to help with simple tasks, and how to speak politely to the elders when necessary. Though she was technically a prisoner, she did not behave like one. She carried herself with quiet dignity, and her respect for the tribe's customs did not go unnoticed. Camel observed her every day, noting how she adjusted to the life of the village, how she learned to cook with unfamiliar ingredients, how she sat silently by the fire listening to the elders' stories. At first, Camel's feelings were simply admiration. He admired her courage and her calm demeanor. He admired the way she smiled softly when she completed a task correctly, or how she thanked him politely when he offered guidance. But admiration soon turned into curiosity. He began to wonder about her past, the life she had left behind, the family she might be missing. One evening, as the wind whispered through the village trees, Camel asked her quietly about her homeland. She hesitated at first but then began to speak, describing a place full of bustling streets, tall buildings, and people of every kind. Camel listened, mesmerized. He had never seen anything like it. For him, the village and the surrounding forests were all he knew. He had fought battles, explored the mountains, and crossed rivers, but he had never imagined a place like the one Alara described. Her words painted a picture so vivid that Camel could almost feel the sounds of the distant city, the smell of the markets, the laughter of children he would never meet. A small warmth grew in his chest, a mixture of wonder and longing, though he could not fully understand it. Their conversations became a quiet ritual. Every evening, after the chores were done and the village had settled into sleep, Camel would bring her a small portion of food or water and sit with her by the fire. They would talk about simple things: the weather, the changing seasons, the animals in the forest, and the stars above. Sometimes they did not speak at all, simply sitting together in the calm of the night. Camel found himself looking forward to these moments more than anything else. Even though he reminded himself repeatedly that she was a prisoner, a guest of the tribe whose life was temporarily entrusted to him, he could not stop thinking about her. Amina, Camel's wife, noticed the subtle change in her husband. She had always trusted him completely, knowing his heart was loyal and true, but now there were small signs she could not ignore. Camel lingered longer than necessary when he spoke of Alara. His attention seemed to drift when the woman was around. Even in the small gestures, the way he carefully placed her blanket at night or brought her extra food, Amina felt a quiet unease. She did not confront him immediately. Instead, she observed, wondering whether it was mere duty or something more. Alara, too, began to notice the small acts of care. She did not misunderstand them, nor did she exploit them. Instead, she treated Camel with respect and gratitude, always careful to maintain boundaries. She could see that he was a man of honor, one whose loyalty to his tribe was strong, yet she sensed that his heart was conflicted. She tried not to push him, understanding that he lived in a world where traditions were everything and emotions could be dangerous if they interfered with duty. Yet, she could not deny that the warmth she felt around him was comforting in a way she had not felt in a long time. One afternoon, the village held a small gathering near the river. It was a tradition to celebrate the harvest and give thanks for the food the land provided. Camel's role, as always, was to ensure everything went smoothly, but he found his thoughts wandering. He watched Alara from a distance as she observed the rituals. She seemed fascinated but respectful, her eyes wide with curiosity and appreciation. Camel noticed how she smiled gently when a child tripped over a root, how she laughed softly at small jokes, and how she listened attentively when the elders spoke. He realized that he admired not just her courage, but her kindness, her curiosity, and her gentle spirit. As the day ended and the villagers returned to their homes, Camel stayed near Alara a little longer than necessary. He walked her back to the small room where she stayed, and for a brief moment, he allowed himself to speak freely. "You are different from anyone I have ever met," he said quietly. Alara looked up, surprised. "I only try to do my best," she replied softly. He smiled faintly, and for the first time he allowed a small crack in his stoic demeanor. There was a human connection here, one built on understanding, respect, and quiet trust. Yet even in that moment he reminded himself of the rules. She was a prisoner. He was a husband. His loyalty must not falter. That night, Camel found it difficult to sleep. Thoughts of Alara crowded his mind, mingled with thoughts of Amina and his duties. He replayed the day's moments over and over, noticing small gestures, small smiles, and fleeting glances. He felt a strange mixture of guilt and admiration. His heart was conflicted, yet he could not deny the growing bond between him and the woman under his care. The night felt longer than usual, and when the first light of dawn crept over the horizon, he realized he had not rested at all. The next few days followed a similar pattern. Camel continued his duties, ensuring the village was safe and the rules were followed. But in the quiet moments when no one else was watching, he spent time with Alara. They exchanged small stories about their childhoods, their dreams, and their fears. She spoke of her longing for home, the people she missed, and the life she had once known. Camel listened, often in silence, his heart growing heavier with each story. He realized that she trusted him completely, more than anyone he had ever met. That trust, fragile and precious, weighed heavily on him. Amina, still observing from a distance, began to sense the depth of this connection. She did not confront him, but she could see that the bond between Camel and Alara was growing stronger. Her heart ached, not out of anger but out of concern. She loved her husband deeply and understood his sense of duty. Yet she could see that something unexpected was unfolding before her eyes. She wondered how long it would be before Camel's loyalty was tested, and whether he would be able to balance duty, love, and the growing emotions he could no longer ignore. One evening, as the wind carried the scent of blooming flowers through the village, Camel and Alara shared a quiet moment by the river. The water sparkled in the fading sunlight, and the world felt peaceful, almost suspended in time. They spoke of simple things, plants that grew along the riverbank, birds nesting in the trees, and the beauty of the sunset. In these quiet moments, Camel began to realize that his feelings were no longer just admiration or curiosity. He felt a connection that went beyond duty, a bond that stirred something deep within him. Yet, even as he felt it, he knew the dangers. He could not let these emotions interfere with his responsibilities or betray the trust of his wife and tribe. Despite the internal conflict, Camel continued to act with care and responsibility. He ensured that Alara was safe, well-fed, and respected, but he never crossed the boundaries that duty demanded. He reminded himself constantly of the rules that governed his life, yet he could not ignore the growing attachment that had taken root. It was a delicate balance, one that required constant vigilance and self-control. Each day became a test of character, patience, and strength, not in battle, but in the quiet struggles of the heart. As Part 2 closes, the stage is set for deeper challenges. Camel's admiration and growing attachment to Alara continue to conflict with his duty to his tribe and his wife. The bond between them strengthens quietly, creating tension, emotion, and anticipation. The story moves forward with questions that weigh heavily on Camel's conscience. How far will his feelings grow? Will duty overcome the heart, or will the heart find a way to break tradition? The days in the village grew longer as the seasons shifted, and Camel's internal struggle became harder to bear. The bond he had formed with Alara was no longer a quiet curiosity. It had begun to occupy his thoughts constantly. Each time he looked at her, he noticed something new, a gesture, a smile, a subtle way she moved that drew his attention. Yet with every glance came a pang of guilt. Camel was a warrior, loyal to his tribe and devoted to his wife, Amina. Tradition had always been clear. A stranger, a foreigner, could never be accepted as one of their own. He knew the rules. He respected the elders, but his heart refused to obey entirely. Alara, too, had begun to understand the tension around her. She noticed Camel's pauses when he thought no one was watching, the way his eyes lingered for just a moment longer, and the careful gestures he made to ensure her comfort. She did not misinterpret his care, nor did she encourage it. She understood the delicate balance of their situation. Every act of kindness he showed her carried the weight of loyalty, duty, and discipline. She saw it in his eyes, the conflict between what he felt and what he believed he must do. And in that understanding, a quiet connection deepened between them, unspoken but undeniable. The elders had begun to notice subtle changes in Camel's behavior. He was still diligent and responsible, yet there were moments when he lingered with Alara longer than necessary. Sometimes his gaze drifted when the prisoner spoke. Other times he seemed distracted during routine patrols, thinking not of threats or safety, but of conversations that had already passed. The elders murmured among themselves in private, concerned that the warrior might be losing focus, that personal feelings could endanger the stability of the tribe. They watched carefully as they always did, knowing that discipline and tradition were what kept the village strong. Amina, Camel's wife, was not blind to the changes either. She noticed the subtle tension in his movements, the quiet moments of distraction, and the slight hesitance in his voice. She had always trusted Camel completely, believing in his honor and loyalty, yet something in her heart told her that a quiet storm was brewing. She did not speak to him directly at first. Instead, she observed, trying to understand what was happening. She reminded herself of the strength of their love, the life they had built together, and the traditions that had guided them. Yet, she could not deny the unease she felt. One afternoon, the elders called a private meeting with Camel. The council gathered in the central hut, the wooden walls echoing with quiet tension. The chief spoke first, his voice calm but firm. "Camel, you are one of our finest warriors. Your strength and loyalty have never been questioned, but it has been noticed that your attention to duty has wavered. You care for the foreign prisoner more than you should. The rules are clear. She is not one of us. You must act according to tradition." Camel listened quietly, feeling a mixture of shame and defiance. He bowed respectfully, acknowledging the elders' authority, but his heart protested. He knew what they said was true. Their traditions had guided generations of the tribe. Duty and obedience were the pillars of their society. But how could he ignore the quiet courage, the resilience, and the humanity he had come to admire in Alara? His feelings, though confusing, had grown stronger with each passing day, and he could not dismiss them. After the meeting, Camel returned home, his mind heavy with conflict. Amina was there, tending to the small garden near their home. She greeted him softly, aware of the weight he carried. Camel tried to speak, but the words caught in his throat. How could he explain what he felt without betraying his duty or wounding her? How could he confess admiration, concern, or affection without crossing boundaries that must never be crossed? Instead, he simply sat with her in silence, allowing the comfort of familiarity to soothe the turmoil within him. Alara, meanwhile, continued to adapt to life in the village. She had begun helping with small tasks, learning the language and understanding the customs more deeply. The elders still watched her carefully, ensuring that she respected their rules. But Camel noticed how her eyes lit up when she discovered something new, how she smiled when she learned a skill, how she listened carefully to the elders' stories, and how she carried herself with quiet dignity. These moments, small as they were, filled Camel with admiration and a strange sense of longing. One evening, as the sun set behind the mountains, casting a golden glow across the village, Camel found himself sitting near Alara again. He brought her a simple meal, and they ate in silence at first. Then, she spoke softly of her memories, memories of distant lands, family she had left behind, and dreams she had once held. Her voice trembled slightly, not with fear but with longing, and Camel listened, moved in a way he had never expected. He realized that he had begun to care for her not as a duty, but as a person, as someone whose presence mattered deeply to him. The growing tension between duty and emotion weighed heavily on Camel. Every interaction with Alara became a test of his character. He could not allow his feelings to interfere with the responsibilities he owed to his tribe or to Amina. Yet each day he felt the pull of something deeper, something he could not name. It was a struggle between the heart and the rules, between loyalty and longing. Camel found himself questioning everything he had known about honor, love, and obedience. Amina, sensing the distance growing between her husband and herself, decided to speak. One quiet evening she approached Camel while he was performing his duties near the river. Her voice was calm but filled with concern. "Camel," she said softly, "I know you care for her. I see it in your eyes. I do not blame you, but I need to know where your heart truly lies." Camel felt a pang of guilt and confusion. He looked at her, seeing the trust and love in her eyes, and yet he knew the truth could hurt her. How could he explain that his admiration had grown into something more, something he did not fully understand? He tried to speak, but words failed him. Instead, he nodded, acknowledging her pain and his own struggle. "I am torn," he admitted quietly. "I do not know how to feel nor how to act. My duty tells me one thing, my heart another." This confession marked a turning point. Amina did not respond with anger, only with a quiet sadness. She understood that life sometimes brought unexpected challenges, and that love could be tested in ways no one anticipated. She stepped back, giving Camel space to reconcile his emotions, while silently preparing herself for the difficult choices that lay ahead. Camel, meanwhile, knew that he could not hide his feelings forever. He continued to care for Alara, ensuring her safety, respecting her dignity, and learning from her presence. But the internal conflict grew stronger each day. The warrior who had once faced battles with courage and certainty now found himself facing an enemy he could not fight with sword or strength, the enemy of the heart. The village continued its routines, oblivious to the quiet struggle within Camel. The elders remained watchful, Amina remained patient, and Alara continued to adapt and respect their ways. But beneath the surface, a storm was brewing. Camel's heart and mind were in constant tension. Every glance, every word, every gesture carried meaning far beyond what he had ever imagined. He realized that the path ahead would not be easy. He would have to make choices that could change his life, his marriage, and his standing in the tribe. As the days turned into weeks, Camel began to notice subtle signs that Alara, too, felt the depth of their bond. She sought him out for advice, looked to him for guidance, and shared small stories of hope and fear. These moments, brief yet powerful, reminded him that her presence in his life was no longer incidental. She mattered to him in a way that transcended duty. And yet, the rules of the tribe loomed large, reminding him constantly that he must act with caution. Camel began to understand that this was more than a simple attraction or fleeting curiosity. He was forming a connection that could not easily be undone, one that would test his loyalty, his courage, and his sense of honor. He realized that he must choose carefully, not only for himself but for everyone involved. The decisions he would soon face would have consequences far beyond his personal feelings. The village, the elders, Amina and Alara, all would be affected by what he chose to do. By the end of this part, Camel stands at the edge of a moral and emotional precipice. The weight of tradition presses upon him. The expectations of the tribe demand obedience, and yet his heart refuses to remain silent. He must confront the growing reality that duty and emotion are now in direct conflict, and that the choices ahead may change the course of his life forever. The morning of the council gathering arrived with an unusual quietness. The village, usually filled with chatter and the laughter of children, seemed tense, as if every person knew that something important was about to happen. Even the birds were quieter than usual, their chirping subdued, as though they sensed the weight of the day. Camel woke early, feeling a heaviness in his chest he had not felt before. Today he would stand before the elders and speak. Today, his loyalty, his emotions, and his conscience would all be tested in a way he could not avoid. The prisoner, Alara, had sensed the tension as well. She moved through her small quarters with a quiet grace, helping where she could without drawing attention. She had come to respect the customs of the tribe deeply, understanding the rules she had inadvertently entered. Yet despite her calm demeanor, Camel could see a flicker of fear in her eyes. She did not know what the elders' decision would be, nor did she know how much influence Camel would have. And in that uncertainty, he saw the quiet vulnerability that made her all the more human to him. Amina noticed her husband's restless energy. She approached him early in the morning, carrying a small basket of fruit and bread. "Camel," she said softly, "whatever happens today, remember that you have always been a man of honor. You have always acted with courage, not just in battle but in your heart." Her words, meant to comfort, carried a quiet warning. She understood that emotions had grown between her husband and Alara, and she knew that whatever choice he made could not be undone. Camel nodded, swallowing the lump in his throat. He loved Amina, he respected her, but his heart had already begun to be drawn in another direction. The elders had gathered in the central hut, their expressions serious and unyielding. The villagers gathered outside, their curiosity tempered with respect, waiting for the council to begin. Camel entered quietly, bowing before the elders as tradition demanded. He could feel the weight of every eye upon him, not just the elders but the villagers, Amina, and even Alara, who watched silently from a corner. He took a deep breath, steadying himself, knowing that the words he spoke today could alter the course of many lives. The chief began the council, his voice firm and commanding. "Camel, you have been given the responsibility of guarding this outsider. You have done so faithfully, yet it has been observed that your attention has faltered. You have grown close to her, and this is not acceptable according to the rules of our tribe. Today you must speak. You must choose. Will she remain in our care, or will she be returned to the lands from which she came? Speak now and let your decision be known." Camel felt a tightening in his chest. His training as a warrior had prepared him for battles with enemies, for storms and wilderness, for protecting the tribe from danger. But no training had prepared him for this battle of the heart. He could feel every eye on him, every expectation pressing down. And yet, as he looked at Alara, he saw not a stranger, not a prisoner, but a human being who had shown courage, kindness, and understanding in a world that was harsh and unyielding. He began to speak, his voice calm but steady. "I have watched her closely," he said. I have seen her respect our customs, our rules, and our people. She has not harmed us, nor shown any intention to do so. I have come to understand her as a person, not just as a stranger or a prisoner, and I believe she deserves our protection." A murmur ran through the gathering. The elders exchanged glances, some frowning, some silent, while the villagers whispered among themselves. This was a decision that no one had expected Camel to take. They had anticipated a simple answer, a choice that would satisfy tradition and maintain order. But Camel's words suggested something more, something daring, something that challenged the rules they had followed for generations. The chief's eyes narrowed, his voice calm but firm. "Camel, you understand what this means. You are asking us to consider someone outside the tribe, someone who does not belong, as worthy of protection. This is not a simple decision. You risk your honor, your position, and even the stability of the village. Are you prepared to face the consequences?" Camel nodded slowly. "I am prepared," he said. "I have thought carefully. My duty to the tribe remains, but my conscience tells me that justice and compassion must guide my choice. I cannot act solely out of tradition when the life and dignity of another human being are at stake." Ilara's eyes widened, a mixture of fear and relief crossing her face. She had not expected such courage from Camel. She had hoped for fairness, for kindness, but to speak openly before the elders required a strength she had never imagined. She could see the resolve in him, the quiet determination that had grown day by day. For the first time, she realized that he was not just a protector assigned by duty. He was someone who would stand for her even against the expectations of many. Amina's heart ached as she listened. She understood the bravery required to speak as he had, yet she could not ignore the pain in her own heart. She loved him, trusted him, and had shared a life filled with years of care and devotion. Yet she also saw that Camel's choice was not made lightly. It was not an act of betrayal, but an act of conscience and principle. And in that understanding, she realized that life often demanded sacrifices, even of the heart. The council deliberated quietly. The elders discussed, weighing the rules against Camel's words, tradition against the evidence of Ilara's character, duty against the call of compassion. The villagers listened, some in disbelief, some in admiration. It was clear that no one had expected the situation to unfold in this way. Camel had dared to challenge norms, yet he did so with respect and honesty. His voice, calm but unwavering, had demanded attention. Finally, after long minutes that felt like hours, the chief spoke again. "Camel has made his choice," he said, "and we have listened. We will honor his judgment, for he has served the tribe with loyalty and courage. This outsider shall remain under our protection, but with conditions. She shall respect our customs fully, contribute to the village in meaningful ways, and her place shall be temporary, subject to our ongoing observation. Camel, your choice has challenged us, but it has also reminded us that compassion must guide our actions." The crowd reacted with quiet surprise and murmurs of approval. Some nodded in agreement, seeing the wisdom in balancing tradition with compassion. Others were hesitant, unsure of how this would affect the tribe in the long term. Camel felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. The decision was made, but the weight of what it meant, how it would affect his relationships, his life, and his heart, was far from over. Ilara approached Camel quietly, her eyes filled with gratitude. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. "I did not expect this. I cannot imagine what you risked for me." Camel looked at her, his expression calm but thoughtful. "You must live with respect for our people," he said. "That is how trust is earned and maintained. But I will stand for you within the bounds of what I can do." Amina, standing nearby, approached him as well. She placed a hand on his shoulder, her touch gentle. "You spoke your truth," she said softly. "It is not betrayal to act with conscience. I do not know what the future holds, but I respect your courage." In the days following the council, life in the village began to settle back into its rhythm. The elders continued to watch, ensuring that rules were respected and that Alara remained an honorable guest. Camel resumed his duties, balancing the responsibilities of his role with the quiet connection he had with Alara. He remained devoted to Amina, honoring their marriage and the life they had built, even as he navigated the complex emotions that had arisen. Alara, for her part, adapted fully to the conditions set by the elders. She contributed to the village, learning skills and customs, and earned the respect of the people over time. She and Camel continued to share moments of quiet understanding, but always with care and respect for the boundaries set by tradition. Their connection remained strong, but now it was tempered with responsibility, honesty, and the awareness of the consequences that any action could bring. As Part 4 draws to a close, Camel stands at a crossroads. He has made a choice that shocked the tribe, challenged tradition, and tested the bonds of family and duty. Yet he has acted with integrity, compassion, and courage. The story now moves toward the final chapter, where the consequences of this decision, the responses of the tribe, and the ultimate resolution of his personal journey will unfold. The stage is set for an ending that will challenge expectations, evoke emotion, and leave a lasting impression on all who witness it. The days after the council's decision were filled with an unusual calm. Life in the village returned to its daily rhythm, but the air carried a quiet tension that no one could ignore. Camel continued his duties as a warrior, ensuring the safety of the village and attending to the needs of his people. He remained devoted to Amina, honoring their bond and the life they had built together. Yet, the connection he shared with Alara, tempered by responsibility and respect, continued to grow quietly in his heart. He knew that every glance, every small gesture, and every shared moment carried weight beyond words. Alara, now fully participating in village life under the conditions set by the elders, had gained the respect of many villagers. She helped with the harvest, assisted in preparing meals, and learned traditional skills that had been foreign to her when she first arrived. Yet, despite her contributions, she never forgot the risk Camel had taken on her behalf. She remained mindful of the boundaries that tradition demanded, carefully balancing her gratitude and admiration with respect for the rules she now lived under. Even as the village adjusted to the new arrangement, whispers of surprise and curiosity persisted. Some villagers questioned the decision, unsure of what it meant for the tribe in the long term. Others admired the courage it had taken for Camel to speak his conscience before the council. His actions had shaken expectations, challenged tradition, and reminded everyone that honor was not only about obedience but also about compassion. Camel carried this duality in his heart, knowing that he had done what he felt was right while accepting that judgment would follow him for the rest of his life. Amina, though composed, struggled with her emotions. She loved Camel deeply, yet she could not deny the changes that had taken place in his heart. She had seen the way he watched Alara, the quiet moments that stretched longer than necessary, the care he had shown beyond what duty demanded. Still, she remained patient, hoping that love and understanding could guide them through this delicate chapter. She had learned that Camel's sense of honor was unshakable, and she trusted that his decisions, even the difficult ones, would be made with integrity. One evening, as the sun dipped below the mountains and painted the sky in hues of gold and red, Camel found himself walking toward the river, where Alara often spent time observing the water and wildlife. He carried a small bundle of herbs and fruits, intending to share them with her as a gesture of care. As he approached, he noticed her sitting on a smooth stone, her eyes reflecting the shimmering water. She looked up as he arrived, a faint smile crossing her lips. "Good evening, Camel," she said softly. "Good evening," he replied, his voice calm but thoughtful. He handed her the bundle and they sat together in silence for a few moments, listening to the gentle flow of the river. Camel felt the familiar pull in his heart, the bond that had grown between them, restrained by duty yet impossible to ignore. He realized that the choice he had made to protect her had changed everything, not just for her but for himself, for Amina, and for the entire village. "I have been thinking," Camel said finally, breaking the silence, "about everything, about duty, tradition, and the heart. The council accepted my judgment, but it was not without consequences. Every choice has consequences. I have tried to act with honor, yet I feel the weight of what I have done more deeply than I expected." Alara listened, her eyes steady and kind. "Camel," she said softly, "you did what you felt was right. You risked much to act with conscience, to protect life and dignity. That is courage, the kind that matters most. Not all battles are fought with swords. Some are fought with the heart, and you have fought bravely." Camel looked at her, moved by her words. He knew they were true, yet the consequences weighed heavily. His connection with her was undeniable, yet he remained bound by loyalty to his tribe and the life he had built with Amina. He realized that his final choice, whatever it would be, would not only affect himself but also the lives of those he cared for most. Days turned into weeks, and the balance between his responsibilities and emotions became more challenging. The villagers adjusted to Alara's presence, though some remained cautious. The elders continued to observe, approving her contributions while reminding Camel and the others that respect for tradition must always remain. The warrior found himself navigating a delicate path, maintaining duty while acknowledging the powerful bond that had formed in quiet moments. Amina, too, faced her own internal struggle. She loved Camel, yet she could not ignore the subtle changes in his heart. She reflected on the life they had shared, the loyalty that had bound them together, and the trials that had tested their bond. One evening, she approached Camel quietly, placing a hand on his shoulder. "Camel," she said gently, "the choices you make now will define all of us. I trust your heart as I always have, but know that honesty and courage must guide your path." Her words carried both a challenge and a blessing. Camel felt the weight of them, understanding that the next steps he took would determine not only his fate, but the future of everyone involved. He knew that he could not avoid the truth any longer. His feelings for Alara had grown beyond admiration. They had become something he could no longer ignore. At the same time, he remained devoted to Amina, who had stood by him with patience, understanding, and unwavering love. One quiet evening, as the village settled into sleep, Camel called Alara to speak privately. They walked to a secluded spot near the hills, where the moonlight painted the landscape in soft silver. "Alara," he said, "what happens next must be done with respect for the tribe, for my wife, and for you. I cannot ignore my heart, yet I must act carefully. I want to protect you, but I must also protect those I love." Alara listened, her gaze steady. "I understand, Camel. Whatever you choose, I trust your judgment. You have always acted with honor, and I will respect your decision." The night was silent, filled only with the whisper of the wind and the distant calls of nocturnal animals. Camel realized that he must make a final, definitive choice, one that would either reconcile his heart with duty or redefine his life entirely. He could no longer leave matters unresolved. The next day, he approached the council once more, this time to speak not only for Alara, but also for himself and the people he loved. The villagers gathered, sensing that something significant was about to unfold. Camel took a deep breath and addressed the elders and the tribe. "I have considered my duty, my conscience, and the bonds that tie us all," he said. "Alara has shown courage, respect, and kindness. She has earned the protection and respect of this village. But more than that, I have come to understand that life is not only about rules and tradition. It is about honesty, compassion, and conscience. I choose to protect her, to stand by her, and to ensure her safety, while honoring my responsibilities to my wife and my people." A stunned silence followed. The villagers and elders could hardly believe the words they heard. Camel had taken a bold stance, balancing the expectations of the tribe with the call of his conscience. He had chosen a path that no one had anticipated, one that required courage, wisdom, and integrity. Amina, standing quietly among the villagers, felt a mix of emotions. She had feared betrayal, yet she saw in Camel's words a deep honesty, a recognition of duty and compassion combined. Though her heart ached at the complexity of the situation, she understood that Camel had acted not out of weakness or desire, but out of conscience and honor. She stepped forward and took his hand, a gesture of support, understanding, and shared strength. Ilara, standing nearby, felt relief and gratitude. She had been uncertain about her fate, yet Camel's words ensured her safety while respecting the village's customs. She knew that life in this new place would not be easy, but she also knew that Camel's courage had opened a door to a future filled with possibility, safety, and understanding. Over the following weeks, life in the village slowly returned to its rhythm. Ilara contributed fully, learning and sharing, while respecting every rule and custom. Camel continued his duties as a warrior and husband, balancing the responsibilities that defined his life. The bond between him and Ilara remained quiet, respectful, and profound, a connection born of trust, admiration, and the courage to act rightly. Amina, though initially uncertain, found peace in understanding that Camel's choices had been guided by integrity and love, not only for her but for all involved. She realized that life was often complex, that the heart could challenge the mind, and that courage sometimes required stepping beyond tradition to act with conscience. She and Camel continued to live together, their bond strengthened by honesty and the recognition that true love sometimes required grace and understanding. Years later, the story of the warrior, his wife, and the foreigner became a tale told in the village, not of scandal or betrayal, but of courage, conscience, and the wisdom to balance heart and duty. Children would listen in awe, elders would nod in respect, and villagers would reflect on the power of compassion and integrity. Camel's choice had shocked the tribe, but it had also taught them that true honor was not merely obedience to rules, but the courage to act rightly, even when the path was uncertain. And in the quiet moments of the evening, when the sun dipped below the horizon and the village was still, Camel would sometimes walk to the river with Ilara. They would share a word, a glance, a smile, carrying in their hearts a bond that had survived fear, expectation, and tradition. A bond that reminded them both that love, respect, and conscience could coexist, even in the most unlikely of circumstances.